All right. Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of Elevate Career Success. We're excited today to have as on our guest a good friend of mine, Daniel Gonzalez. A quick intro for Daniel. He's the head of finance at Restaurants Brand's iconic Popeyes brand, as well as its brand CFO. He has spent his recent career leading finance, marketing, and analytics for numerous very popular and iconic brands within the Restaurant Brands Burger King Popeyes franchises. For those who may not know, Restaurant Brands owns Burger King, Tim Hortons, Popeyes, amongst other brands, and in total about 27,000 restaurants generating roughly 34 billion in system-wide sales. Their parent 3G is behind many of the even other well-known brands you guys might know about, such as Kraft Heinz, Burger King, Anheuser-Busch, etc. Prior to his leadership roles here, he was an investment banker at Goldman Sachs and Jefferies. We're super excited to have Daniel on. Thank you for joining us.
Gosh, glad to be here. Good to see you again.
Awesome. Excellent. So we have a few different kind of topics that I wanted to cover with you, Daniel. I think first, let's maybe start off with your own career journey and start with your current role maybe, and then kind of work backwards on kind of what led you there.
Yeah. So look, I think, currently, as you mentioned, leading finance and development for Popeyes here, as the brand CFO. And really kind of like what I'm doing now is trying to help position our business for growth. So really trying to work to build new restaurants, improve the image, and create a growing stream of cash flow for the business, well into the future. And I think, my career path at RBI, Restaurant Brands International, is, I've been here 8 years almost now. And I've had about 12 different positions in the 8 years. So I've touched everything from treasury, finance, insurance, risk management, development, construction, media, sponsorships, marketing, leading marketing in Europe. So basically everything that you could think of, in the business I've done. And I think it's kind of led me back to probably my most comfortable place, which is in finance and development. So, going back to the where I was, in banking, way back, what feels like forever ago. I think I'm now focused on that, but I can use all the things that I've learned over the last 8 years in this business, to make me better, a better leader, and strategically and otherwise. So I think that like it all kind of builds on itself. And I think this is what, I think is helping propel us, into the future.
A couple of things, and Daniel's being modest. Obviously, he's had an accelerated career within, RBI, having touched a lot of different brands, and we'll get into the different roles that he's taken on, whether it's in finance, marketing, analytics. But I think one of the points we'll come back to here is how each of those roles perhaps has helped him, accelerate and also achieve success in his current role. Maybe we'll touch on your, where you started your career. You started in investment banking, Jefferies and Goldman. A lot of our audience, presumably would be starting their careers out, in some of these traditional paths like investment banking, consulting, et cetera, like yourself. Maybe go back and talk about what you learned from those experiences that helped you now, lead, some of the largest brands in the world.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm biased, of course, but I think that starting your career in banking and or consulting, anything of the like is probably the best place, in the planet to start your career. And I think the reason why is in terms of like the things that you learn, right? So in my case, where I'm, working in finance and development now, the things that you learn that are most important, like attention to detail, models always balance, the formatting, like it's reflective of you as a professional in your work. So if your materials look great, the numbers add up, you're thoughtful in terms of how things are put together, it really helps you, accelerate your career, in multiple different ways. So, even still, like, if I need to, and I'll do it from time and again, if I need to build a LBO from scratch, I can do it in an hour. Thankfully, at this point, I don't have to do it that often. But, all of those kinds of skills to be able to then ultimately, at the end of the day, I think it was like the analytical framework to like understand what you're doing, the drivers of the business, like what are the sensitivities, and that can be either in cap structure or revenue streams or cost exposure. I think what I learned the most and what's helped me be most successful there is like understanding the business models, as you're building business models, which lots of folks starting out do. That's going to help you kind of ask questions about things that maybe other folks that are just diving right in don't take the time to like really understand.
Yeah, I love that answer. Follow-up question to that, Daniel, like when did you kind of realize that I think the challenges of running a business are often, I think, a lot more difficult than just, in the client service side when you're, more like reactionary to some of the things. I think when you're running a business, you have to be so, forward thinking and actually like, proactive in some of the things that you do. But maybe when did you realize that, you did enjoy the corporate and strategic side of things, and then kind of went down that path? So kind of what were the considerations that you made in your mind to making that switch from finance to strategy?
Yeah, so I think there were two main drivers of it. I think the first was like being, on the client service side, you're in the service business, so you're building your own franchise, whether if you're in a consumer retail group or a sponsors group or whatever it is, you're building that franchise, but you're reactionary to your clients. And I think what I wanted to spend my time on was, building something that, like, for example, I did a lot of sell side M&A. And in the sell side M&A, everybody knows that page, key investment considerations, right? Like all the reasons why this business is going to double its EBITDA in the next like 3 or 4 years. I wanted to take the time to actually do that myself. So see the business, understand what those sensitivities are, and then go put a plan together, execute that plan, and then look back and see the results, that you were able to, able to deliver. So this was one of the main reasons why I wanted to get into the, the operating business side. I think that the other thing, and you kind of touched on it, the second point is, similar to, once you understand how to build, three statement models and you've done deals, and you understand cap structure, you understand how to look through credit docs, you can always kind of go back to that. The rules will change, new products come out, other things kind of vary slightly, but you can always kind of go back to that. And that's what I was thinking. So what to me was foreign was, how do I go run a business? I don't know that I want to be an operating partner anywhere at some private equity group, but I want to go run a business myself. How do I build a team? How do I put a culture together? How do I really build something of value? So then the combination of wanting to do something in an operating role, but also then, be able to do the thing that to me was more scarce, right? Like having that operating experience, those two things kind of led me to something, kind of like where I am today, where it's a fast-paced culture, and a ton of responsibility. So those are really the two main reasons, Kaushik, why I decided to go this path.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think this is from personal experiences. Was talking to a lot of people on the operating side. I think the challenges are so different, but also I think so much more fulfilling in some ways, because you are solving kind of this organizational as well as building something from the ground up challenges, which are just different. And I think they're kind of satisfying in a lot of different ways. So that's helpful.
Absolutely.
Before we jump into kind of, I want you to help us break down kind of the different roles within finance strategy and analytics, et cetera, and marketing. Before we do that, maybe a little bit on your own journey, right? So you, and we'll get to this later in the international section as well, but like you took on multiple different roles, prior to getting to this, this current role that you're in. So maybe you could talk about how, you alluded to this a little bit, the marketing, the strategy, et cetera, helped you helped you succeed and kind of thrive in this finance role that you have now.
Yeah, so I think like when I started, it was in just a normal finance role, like in the corporate finance team, and then very quickly within 6 months, I took over the real estate business for Burger King, which at the time was north of $100 million EBITDA business, and I didn't have much experience in real estate. So I think that like that I knew what I didn't know. So, what I did is I spent a lot of time with the team to learn from them, to ask them, how can I be successful? What can we do better? What are we not doing well? Where are the risks in our business? And, there were some people on the team that were there at the company for 20 plus years. So they could really give some guidance, and they've always wanted the opportunity to run the business. So then I don't want to say it was easy, but like just listening, like step one, to listen. And then like I started to get my confidence as a leader. So then from there, like that business, I mean, it went really well. Then I was able to move over into the marketing side. And I think in our business, right, in the franchise space, big picture, right, two levers for us to create value, right? You build new stores, real estate development, and you grow existing sales at your units, which is on the marketing side. So I was a, finance background, banker, went to a finance focused business school, but then found myself in marketing where it was completely foreign to me. I knew absolutely nothing about what it was that I was supposed to be doing, day one. And so I think that like this was the second time, just like in real estate, where I took on a new role where day one I knew nothing about like what it was, but it was a big opportunity to take a step up. And then, it was not as much about the subject matter, but rather getting over not necessarily the fear, but having the confidence that no matter what is thrown at you, you can, take out a blank sheet of paper, problem solve. Okay, where are the gaps in the business? Like, what is my business model for this role? And then you start to put that together. So then, spent a year there in marketing. Then I took over, a development team, which was, 30 people at the time, um, you know, remodeling 700 stores in a year. Then you start to apply that stuff. And then they all started to build on each other in the sense that, when I took over the development team, which was 2015, anytime you deal with, we're in a franchise business, and our franchisees would always want to talk about how sales are going, what's going on with the business, and I was young, I was new at the company. I bridged some of that experience gap by having touched marketing and real estate prior so that I could talk to them about their business no matter where or when, you know, 2 years into my being in the company, whereas, in many other places, it might have been 5 or 10 years before I would get that kind of experience. So at that point in time, I had touched finance, real estate, marketing, development, construction. Then at that point, really on any side of the business, I was confident enough to be able to go and do anything. So then from there, our business, RBI, like we use master franchise partnerships all over the world. So we have, some publicly traded franchisees, but, some of these businesses are generating, 50 million of EBITDA at the franchise level, right? And we do them with big partnerships, well-capitalized private equity partners all over the world. So then I took on a role of putting those deals together. So then I started to spend a bunch of time in Europe, working in France and Belgium on some of the European deals. And then in that role, I had spent time in real estate, finance, development, marketing. So I could articulate, as someone probably much more experienced than what I really was, but I actually understood the business well enough to, run a basically sell side process on my own. And then, we put together, with our partners in France, a deal for Belgium where, we got Burger King into the country, just a few years ago, and it's one of our most successful new country entries, in a really long time. So, and then like that was kind of the bridge, Kaushik. I was spending a bunch of time in Europe, in France and Belgium, and then, the team said, hey, Daniel, you seem to be doing a good job here in Europe. Why don't you take over the marketing team in Europe? And, just like with real estate, like I mentioned, and then marketing, as I mentioned, in the US, moving over to Europe where the scope was 5,000 restaurants, 5 billion plus in sales, 50 countries, from Russia to UK down to South Africa, all of the Middle East, it was scary, but I think that I had done marketing before. I had dealt with people like this before, and I knew a bunch of them already. So the sting or the shock of like, hey, now I'm living in Switzerland and Zurich and looking after all this, it wore off after a day. And then you just take out your blank sheet of paper yet again. Okay, what are the big markets that matter? Okay, Germany, UK, Spain. Okay, what's going on with the marketing calendars there? How are the teams? What do we need to do better? And then, you start to move the ship. And so I think that like this kept building. Then I moved back to the US to work, to lead the marketing team for Popeyes. And it was a similar thing. And I had just come from like a marketing head role. So then this was like, I know exactly what I need to do. There's no, sting at all of something foreign, right? I know exactly what I need to do. I know the team that I want to bring, the KPIs that I want to go out and tackle. And then in a relatively short period of time, which is now 8 years, having done all these kinds of things. And then now in my role, I can talk about the marketing calendar, our product pipeline, the media strategy, what we're doing with new restaurant technology. So it's kind of built on itself. And I feel fortunate that I've had the ability, to be able to do all this. And then going back to my original thesis, of like coming here, like learning the operating side of the business. If I wanted to go back into investing now, I think that I could bring like a skill set that would be very different than a lot of other people, with this much, experience. So, I love what I'm doing, and it's an incredible opportunity. But I think that for some of the folks that, that you're, with Elevate, with your group, I think it's a really unique background that I think might, if people want to spend a long time in investing, understanding how to run the business could be a big value add to people over the long term.
First of all, thanks. I think that's super interesting and actually really fascinating. We'll dig into some of this, but the journey that you've had, a couple takeaways that I had. I think the first thing, you're exactly right. The last point that you made in terms of, what, let's just even think your long term in, later on in their career wants to be a really good investor. Look, I think the commodity is the financial transactional side of things, right? So anyone can kind of put together a financing package. Anyone can put together kind of the leverage behind the deal, the financial engineering. But I think the true value add is, I think as I've even discovered over my career, is the operational value add that you can bring and how to improve these businesses from the ground up, because that's effectively, what you're trying to do over your ownership period. So that kind of speaks a little bit to the investing audience. And then I think the operating audience, or people who are still trying to figure some of this stuff out. I mean, I think Daniel's a great case study, right? One, you want to get into leadership roles in these different groups. Oftentimes you're placed in positions that, you have sort of no background in, and people just say, hey, figure it out. So I think that's the kind of courage and problem solving ability you take on over your career, and it builds on top of each other. Like, you're not going to be CEO of Burger King like day one, right? Or you're not. What you do rely on is these experiences over your career that sets you in that position over your career. So I think you captured it really spot on. So thanks for doing that. The next topic I want to dive into, Daniel, with you is can you help us break down sort of the career paths, within a restaurant brands, within, your franchises, on kind of three different areas. Maybe we'll start off with, one's in finance, and how does one get to become, you charted your own path to become, head of finance, and brand CFO, but what does that career path in finance look like? And then we'll get to, marketing and then strategy.
Yeah. So I think, look, a couple different ways to go about it. And I think that like any good team, any good company is going to have people that have a diversity of backgrounds and experiences. So even like my profile and experience isn't exactly the same as, some of my peers. So I think that like the one thing that I would say in common though, if I look across, the different people that we have that are kind of in my position, almost everyone has a pre-RBI or pre-business school, experience in banking or private equity of some kind, right? So you learned a bunch of the skills, attention to detail, all the things that I mentioned at the beginning, I think are there. So you have this like initial building block of training foundation that you can then leverage into many other things. I think the other like path, like, so once you start with that, then to be honest, like at our company, it's people that are really hungry to kind of like grow and learn and aren't afraid of like taking on some of these new challenges, because almost every single person, in my position, has gone, it's not just a vertical path in finance, right? Like we have to be multidimensional. You have to be able to articulate your business, deal with franchisee challenges or issues, address supply chain. So we can't just be like a straight vertical, in any one place. So I think the one common thread is starting out with a background in banking or consulting, using that foundation to then come in, create value day one, and then honestly find out what it is that you like to do. And I think that the thing that like, why I am where I am now is because this is what I want to be doing. It doesn't feel like work to me. Yeah, it's hard work and certainly challenges, but like I'm having fun. And I think that when you think about things like this, you don't count the days, you're not counting anything. This is when you have creative solutions. This is when you go above and beyond. This is when you're able to recruit the best people on the planet to come onto your team. And then they develop, very special, solutions for you. So I know there's not one career path in finance. I think, as I mentioned, there's a similar starting place, but, there are people that have a similar position that don't have that. But I would say by and large, having that kind of background really helps because then you can, pull the different levers to the P&L, over time that are going to help you, really address the big challenges of the business.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And probably the similar answer to, you'll give to marketing and for strategy in terms of not a single career path. Maybe a follow up to that, in the role of head of finance or brand CFO, what are maybe the 3 or 4 things at a high level that you're responsible for? P&L for the business, maybe, M&A, maybe help people understand what are the different,
Sure.
things you're responsible for.
Yeah, so I think that I have the whole finance, like financial planning and analysis part. So this is budgeting, forecasting, CapEx, all the kinds of things like your traditional as traditional as finance gets. I have, all of that, as well as collections and some of the AR and AP and some of the more manual stuff. But like everything finance related, kind of sits there, and especially, in a position like we are today with Popeyes, where the profile of the business is changing a lot. It's not just status quo. Like we're changing a lot of things, back of house now from a planning perspective, because things are so radically different, and we're trying to approach the world, in a different way. So I have everything finance related, everything from a restaurant development perspective. So this is, field development people, construction people, architects and designers, and even like development analytics as well. So, what area makes for a good Popeyes, right? Like what do we think each one of these Popeyes are going to do from a sales standpoint? How does it work within the existing network of Popeyes? So the strategy of like, where do we want to put stores? What do they look like? How are they constructed? What does the process look like to get them there, so that the lever of building new restaurants is there as well. The other area of responsibility that I have is on the franchising side. So when we think about, we run a franchise business, we're out there, there's a lot of franchisee to franchisee M&A activity where one group sells to another. So I'm looking after that with my franchising team, but we're also bringing in new franchisees as well. So when we think about, complementary, operators. So imagine there's a very well capitalized private business that is, running another brand that isn't a conflict with Popeyes. We might talk to them and approach them, put together a deal for them to come in and start to build Popeyes, right? And it's separate from the existing pipeline of new store developments that are coming with the existing guys. So, finance, development, design, architecture, franchising, all of the analytics that come with that as well. This is really, the scope. And then, yeah, it's like like I mentioned, some of the M&A activity, other kind of projects that, that might be transformative for the business, we'll look at as well. And look, we're trying to drive business value, right? And that's my goal. Is I think about, what's out there that can help us get to where we want to get to, without cutting corners, but do it as fast as possible. And so, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then that's super helpful. I think it's really helpful for people to understand that kind of a lot of the skills that you're building early on in your career, whether it's in school or outside, this is actually it in practice, right? So you're helping run a, X billion-dollar company at a high level, via using those skills. I think so. That's how it comes, in, and then you were responsible for, the projections. You're responsible for kind of the financial side of how the business, is either presented or performs. And so that is kind of the real side of the academic stuff that we're learning. So that's super, super helpful. And then maybe you kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier. Kind of what are some of the keys to success, whether it's from yourself or other people that you've seen, in order to have these sort of accelerated careers, within an organization like yourself, which frankly is, it's a tough place to work. So what has worked for other people? What's worked for yourself in terms of what you've done well?
Yeah, I think it's really like success is really, there's a number of different drivers, but the main ones that I would distill it down to, number one would be results, right? Both for you and your team. So, if you're in charge of building the restaurants and, we need to deliver a number of X by the end of the year, we need to deliver our targets and do it in the right way. So I think that goes part and parcel with our company, our culture, results driven mindset, trying to grow as fast as we can. So I think the results, of course, is number one. But results by themselves don't mean success, in a business like this. And I think the other thing that's most important, second most important, would be, what kind of leader you are, what kind of teams you run. Do people enjoy working with you? And I think that this for me was an adjustment coming from banking, in the sense that, you know, most everyone in an analyst class or an associate class comes from like a certain level of background, right? They all went to a top school. They're all, at top of their class in high school, all these kinds of things. I think that when you work into a big company, even one that's as, high, as successful as ours, you have a variety of different backgrounds, and not everybody comes from the same background. And to do well in a company, you're going to need to lead people that may not share your same background. So you need to lead people that, might have been at the company 25 years, and you're now in charge of that team. They know the business much better than you. How do you motivate them? How do you get them to work well with you? How do you get them to work, extra hard and help you find creative solutions to things? And even, folks that aren't in your structure. So for example, in finance and development and real estate, you depend on the attorneys a lot, and the attorneys aren't in your structure. So how do you make sure that with all the volume of work going on, that the attorneys want to prioritize your work? And so, finding the way to be the person that people want to work for, whether you're recruiting for your team, or, it's a peer of yours. If you can get people excited to help and to see your success and that your team's success, that's going to accelerate your career. Because I've seen people that do really well from a result standpoint, but people just don't get along with them, and then it's hard to get put into a leadership position, a big leadership position, if you can't be trusted to build a team and to run a team. So I think that the people side by far and away is like the number two thing with results, because if you are a great person that people want to work for, you can recruit people, like you can get things done and do it in a way where people are ready to do it again tomorrow. This is the special sauce that can then lead to much bigger and faster opportunities for you.
Yeah, that makes sense. The people side is truly, you're right, like the most underrated part of kind of being a leader, right? I think people focus on results, but results are only possible if, with the teams and everything that support you. So I totally agree with that. The next kind of topic I want to spend time on is, you alluded to this earlier, but your experience, internationally, we call it case studies of some of the challenging problems that you've solved over your career. So maybe we'll start with that point that you raised earlier, in the challenge of building an international, business in a new market, or just more broadly of some of the international growth, activities that you've done.
Yeah. So look, I think the best example of that, Kaushik, would be, a few years ago, 2016, we didn't have any Burger Kings in Belgium. It was the only Western European market where we didn't have any network. And our master franchisee in France had just acquired, the number 2 burger competitor in France. And so they were in the process of converting all of those restaurants in France from Quick to Burger King. But the French, our master franchisee there, Quick also had units in Belgium, but the French weren't interested in taking those units. So they wanted to divest, the Belgian network. Now, Quick as a brand is from Belgium. So it was by far and away much stronger than in France. We didn't have any Burger Kings there. So the challenge that I had was, how do I take something that is very valuable and local and nostalgic for Belgians in Belgium, and convince private equity, family offices, and others in Europe that it's more valuable as a Burger King that is going to cost you, in addition, to the multiple on cash flow that you pay, imagine each unit would cost anywhere from €500,000 to €1 million to convert from a Quick into a Burger King. So, you have a going concern of Quick, doing, X million euro of EBITDA, and then you've got a Burger King case, but it's going to cost you an extra, call it €50 million, whatever it is in CapEx, but there's not one Burger King in Belgium to be able to represent what that business case is. So this was the challenge that we had to solve. And I think the way that we approached it was, look, we knew that our business in France was very successful. And then we started to nibble at the edges in terms of, do we think it's going to be successful in Belgium or not? So one of the things that we looked at was the Burger Kings that opened right on the border with Belgium and France. What happened to the comp sales of the Quicks in Belgium at the same time that the Burger Kings opened right on the other side of the border? And then you start to line these things up. Oh, wow, there's a big dip. Does that mean that people are driving from Belgium into France to go to this? Maybe they're interested. Okay. So then on top of that, we did some research in Belgium to ask, how often would you go to a Burger King? What is your brand awareness of Burger King? This is where my marketing experience came in, because then I know the survey questions exactly to ask. And then we found that in Belgium, the brand awareness, where we had 0 restaurants, was just as high as it was in France. It's just as high as it was in the UK. It's just as high as it was pretty much everywhere else in Europe. So here we have a very high brand awareness. Here we already know that people are coming from Belgium into France to go and try it. And then we have the success in France of the business, which was doing really well. And so, we kind of used that and then ran a process. So put my banker hat back on, ran a process to, talk to all the right folks in Europe, which is a fascinating process, different from some of the things I've done in the States. We found a great partner, in the family office that actually was already involved in some of our business in Italy. And so they knew us. They knew what kind of business we ran. They saw the opportunity. So it really took, some creative marketing efforts, but also someone that already knew us and wanted to be around for the long term with us. And, we have the 3 brands today. Do we have more? Does this create opportunities for us down the line if we partner with them? So we're able to kind of parlay all of this into, what I think is a very successful, a business in Belgium now, which, a couple of years ago we had 0 stores. So I think that this one is a combination of, research, marketing, banking, M&A, modeling, hustling, right, to try to find the right people in Switzerland and Netherlands, everywhere, to talk to. But it was really, really fascinating, and I think, a very good outcome in the end.
That's amazing. I love that story. I think you're exactly right. It kind of, it's a real problem. It's a problem that you're trying to solve. And you're kind of new to the market, maybe you're new to that particular market, but putting on kind of the 6 or 7 hats you just talked about to solve this problem is, I think, the crux of really the, finding those experiences that you can actually use your prior experiences, but also grow so much from, because you're now putting them in practice. I think the biggest thing about the people who I think really succeed and accelerate in their careers and through life is the ones that are taking kind of innovative approaches to solving new types of problems, but also are able to solve it on like 4 or 5 different fronts in new ways. So I love that example. And I guess I got to ask you this: how did you balance the cultural differences that might exist, but how did you approach that problem of trying to solve almost like 15, 20 different countries and coming up with a plan for those?
Yeah. I mean, look, I've done a number of things in my career. This position was by far the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life, because it was, 50 countries. And, Russia, although the brand is Burger King, the competitive dynamics, what goes on from a culture and government standpoint there is completely different than what happens in Saudi or in South Africa or in the UK. So how to solve, I mean, really, you have to become a good listener, and you have to invest the time to show up prepared, because, imagine this, like, at the time, relatively young guy, these people have been running these businesses for a long time. Who am I to tell them how to run their business when it's my first time in Moscow, as an example? So a lot of preparation to try to demonstrate to them that you understand their business, and then you come with thoughtful, prepared questions and a plan. That breaks down the barrier of like, okay, Daniel showed up prepared. This guy seems to know what he's talking about. We will at least give him a chance, and we're going to listen to him. So then how do you adjust across all the different markets? You need to do that everywhere. The challenge is, with that many markets, you can't do it all by yourself. So I go back to the team element. You have to have the right team to prioritize the right things, so that when you show up in Madrid the next day, you're briefed on everything from your team the right way. The right questions to ask. The history of the business. You don't step onto landmines, so to speak, in terms of past things that have happened that didn't work out well. You should know them. So it just takes a lot of preparation. And then at the end of the day, it's not, rocket science in terms of what we're trying to do, but it really just takes the time and the effort to plan, ask the right questions, listen, and then you problem solve, right? And sometimes you have really creative solutions, and sometimes the simple ones are the right ones, and oftentimes that's the case. So I think there's no secret sauce there, but it's really just trying to bridge the gap, at least in my case, of this is my first time over there, my first international experience, show them that I care, get them to trust, and then you can have a professional conversation based on the merits of what you're actually bringing to the table in terms of the business model or anything else. But if they don't respect you right out of the gate, it's really hard to influence someone to even listen to you.
That's awesome. I feel like culture is a different competitive landscapes. It's fascinating to have to learn all that in a short period of time. So that's amazing. There are a couple other, I think, case studies I did want you to touch on. Is this? I know we talked about a little bit about the growth of Popeyes brand. After Burger King, you're kind of responsible now for this brand. They acquired them in 2017, and it's kind of in the last year, it's been a kind of revitalization of the franchise, et cetera. Maybe comment a little bit on the challenges of that growth and how you approach that opportunity.
Yeah, so I think, look, it's right now it's everyone's very excited. Our franchisees are excited. The market is excited. Landlords are excited. Developers are excited. So I think really what we're trying to do right now is just to set all of this up in a way so that we can translate, what we've seen in terms of like really outsized top line growth, translate that into long-term unit growth. And where we're starting, like we're building up the team, to really enhance like the resources, the tools that we use, the amount of analytics that we use in the business. We're structuring it that way so that we understand the why. I touched on, what makes a good Popeyes. This is a question that we're working on answering, to the best of our ability so that, we can say with confidence to new partners, whether it's a private equity backed business or a family office that's investing, and we have both, we think that these are the right places to go. Here's how you can succeed. And once they start to see the success, then the businesses, will kind of run very quickly from there. So we really want to have success right out of the gate. And I think it's a thoughtful, measured approach to have success early so that people are confident they can see the versatility of the Popeyes business, the mass appeal of the Popeyes business, and then it's going to run very quickly from there. So really just trying to answer basic questions, honestly, of like why we will be successful in certain places and not others. And then that's going to help guide us to who our partners should be, all these other kinds of things that are going to determine, what our long-term growth looks like.
What I love about your story as well is kind of just when you get comfortable in one seat, it seems like, you're asked to go take on a different challenge, which is truly very unique a lot of ways. Because a lot of times I think people think of, and I'll be honest, we see a lot of these in the traditional kind of finance fields. In order to do that, you kind of have to go externally, perhaps to get that challenge. But in this case, having this immense brand, portfolio allows you to kind of do that within the franchise, right?
I mean, look, like I couldn't even tell you the number of times I've been really uncomfortable, in terms of like what it is that that I was doing, right? Whether it's in a meeting with 5 people from a creative agency talking about the marketing campaign for something, my first day on the job in marketing, like I was a fish out of water. Like I had no idea, but over time, you ask questions, be thoughtful about it. And then the experience kind of builds on itself so that, that you're not afraid of, now you have a good experience, 3-4 years in, I had an excellent experience. I wasn't afraid of asking questions, and I had some results to back it up. I had some experience to back it up. So then I could, influence the future in the way that I saw right to be right. And whether it was right or wrong, I don't know. But I think like that to me is what's most exciting, because as you said, like as soon as I start to feel really comfortable and confident, things change. And I think that every time you stretch and you feel uncomfortable, this is when you're really growing, right? You're learning something new. And I think that for me is why I'm most excited about what I'm doing now. Is, now I'm leading a team. I'm comfortable with the subject matter, but we've never had a business that is growing the way that this one is. Very few businesses in the category, have seen sales like Popeyes is seeing now. So, you know, it's problem solving. It's problem solving 101 with a bunch of background. And I think that, like, to in 8 short years, to really be able to build something where I feel like I could go do anything. I think that that is what I think, you know, this is the kind of people that we want, the people that want that kind of challenge. And I think that what you can give back and what you have at the end is, it's the most valuable thing you could possibly have, because then you could go do anything
Yeah.
afterwards.
That makes sense. I want to get to the next set of topics on, or just the topic on the types of candidates and roles you seek for people on your team, as well as the ones that succeed or enter the whole franchise. So maybe we could talk about what are what is typically the backgrounds of the people that you're looking for, whether it's for your team or for more broadly, and then what perhaps the recruiting process is like, and what are the interviews like and things like that.
Yeah. So I think that in terms of profiles, I mean, it's all over the place, but I would say what I'm most interested in, I think what we generally as an organization, we're looking for people that are very analytical. So people with a banking background, people with a consulting background, people with private equity. I have on my team, I have bankers, consultants, private equity, and hedge fund people all kind of on my team, reporting to me now, from various companies, different geographies all over the world. But this is what we really look for. And I think we do that because, our culture is very much based on, business cases, and we're very analytical. So everything, if you want, X million dollars for a capital project, like, you're going to show a business case for that. And you need people that have the ability to be able to articulate what a return is, what the project's going to look like, why it's important, and frame it up within the broader context of of the overall situation. So we love profiles like that. And then you put that, like, analytical background and rigor with someone who wants to learn the business. And the business for us, yes, we're in the restaurant business today, but we're also in the supply chain business. We also have a retail business. We're in the marketing business. We're in the product innovation business. So there's like 15 different businesses in one here. So if people are analytical and they're hungry to learn all these different businesses that we have within RBI, then you can find, 10 different paths in the company, always moving up at the same time and delivering good results at the same time. You're going to do really well. So these are kind of the profiles that we look for. And then, Kaushik, to your point on what the interview process is like, we really focus on two things, the analytical part. So we do case interviews, and, we'll talk to you about like a pricing case study for Burger King, and or something for Popeyes, or what is the return on investment for new equipment, and how should you think about that? So we do cases a lot, but I think just as important as that is like the culture fit, for our business, because I talked about the people side a lot, but you have to have people that are going to be tough enough to to be able to deal with a fast-paced company and culture that, that is going to adjust all the time. So, we're just coming through COVID, and we're still in COVID. 1 week into the pandemic, I restructured my entire team, to focus people more on franchise liquidity, right? How do we understand PPP? How can I give my franchisees a model that will show them, they plug in their restaurant number, what their sales are, how they're going to staff, and then we can look at the forgiveness amounts of PPP. And this is something that we did in a week, right? And we did that because I have ex-bankers and consultants on my team that we could very quickly, like, work through that. Some people are looking to go to the corporate side, because they want to have, a steady, change of, a steady change of pace coming from the service side. That's not what we are, right? And that's not who does well. So, like, if you're from a cultural standpoint, hungry to learn, and you have that analytical background, like, we're going to tease those things out in the interview process. So, you'll meet with a bunch of people to hammer on both points. And then our final round is basically you'll meet with the CEO, Jose, but also there's a panel of the leadership team, where, 4 or 5 people on one side, 4 or 5 candidates on the other. And look, it's a lively experience, but, it comes down to culture and analytics. And if you have both of those two things, like, it's going to be, people do really well. And I've seen it happen a bunch.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. A couple follow-up questions to that. What key differences between coming and joining, your teams out of undergrad versus MBA, or somewhere in the middle, like outside of an investment banking or consulting program?
Yeah.
If you comment a little bit on how those two paths might be different.
Yeah, so I think that we have a program for folks right out of undergrad. We call it our LDP program. It's a leadership development program, and also for MBAs. I was one. And in both of those, like the LDPs, will come in and you'll do 2 6-month rotations. Once you're placed in a team, and it's not too dissimilar from banks where you fill out what you're interested in, the different teams with needs fill out the candidates that they like, and it's kind of like a ranking system, and this is where you start. So you'll rotate 6-month rotation, 6-month rotation, and then you'll take a final placement. And I think it's a great experience because at least for me, coming right out of undergrad, yes, I was in banking. I didn't necessarily choose my group or the subject matter. I got put to where I was, and luckily, I enjoyed what it was that I was doing and the people that I was working with. I was just lucky. But I think this structured rotation allows people in a business with 15 different businesses, like I mentioned, a chance to touch different parts and then really understand what it is that they want to do, once they're, 9, 12 months in. So I think it's a great program. And people can do really, really well there. I think the MBAs, there's not a rotation. You come in and look at, MBAs already have 4 or 5 years of experience, on average, let's say, and then you come in a similar ranking process, and then you get put into a team, and there's, no rotation. But I think, as in anywhere else, whether it's in banking or otherwise, like the expectation of MBAs are that you can lead a team, you can lead people, you have a common sense filter that maybe someone right out of school, an LDP might not necessarily have. And so I think it's a great path. I think the one difference though for people coming right out of school to go into banking or, to come to us, I think it's just a different path, right? If you want to, like, if you spent some summers interning in banking, like it could be a great path, and it could be a great path, straight out of the gate. But I think if you understand that you really want to learn how to like run a business, I think a business like ours, is one of, I'm biased, of course, but I think, one of the best places, where you can go. Banking is just a different path. You're going to be much more, skilled at, modeling and credit docs and cap IQ and all these kinds of things that like a lot of the folks that are, in your network will know, but that's not necessarily what's going to drive all of your long-term success. So I think it's just a mix, and we see all kinds of people. Like we see people coming over, and after 2 years of banking, we see people, with 1 year, 3 years. It really just depends on what it is that you think, like as you learn about yourself and your career, what you really want to do, what you think you want to do. It's a great option. Just different path, like not right or wrong, just different.
But that makes a lot of sense. I think it's really helpful to get your perspective on kind of what that entry point, as well as kind of what they do look like. And frankly, like to Daniel's point, it is kind of, if you think about your career as kind of a 20, 30-year path to at least operational roles that we're talking about, as well as kind of the mix of operational, strategic, marketing, finance, et cetera, there's just so many even exit points. And sure, you want to stay, if you're recruiting to be part of Daniel's team at RBI for the next 20 years, frankly, maybe not everyone goes on that path. And I think the exit ops out of something like this, like an LDP, also immense, right? It's entrepreneurship or other things where you need that experience of all these different hats to be successful. The last topic, I think just parting topic, is just your views on outlook and some of the trends. One thing I think that's inherent in all this is RBI is very different from, I think, a lot of other when you term like kind of corporate brands, et cetera, kind of the parent in some sense, 3G, I think generally is known to run very efficient businesses without a lot of people overhead, et cetera. So that might be, I think that contributes a lot to your own experience, Daniel. But maybe anything you want to highlight about working under that kind of private equity type framework in a very efficient environment?
Yeah, I mean, look, like I think that I think it's most reflective in the culture. So I think that the kind of people that we recruit. So we recruit, at all the top schools that, many of the people that are probably in your network, might have interviewed with us. But I think it's almost in a sense where like if you, I don't want to say we have fewer people, but like we're lean, but we like to think that the caliber of our people are better. And that kind of recipe is one that has produced results for us. And it's not lean because it's cheaper, right? I think people get compensated actually quite well in our company. So I think it's really about the mixture of fewer but better quality.
Yep.
And then, I think it's amazing because then the people that I worked with, in the past, the people that I work with now, the caliber of them is no different than any bank or private equity group or otherwise. It's the same caliber of people. And I think that the 3G culture is kind of like, it's part and parcel. It's the same thing. It's in our DNA in terms of how we run. And to be honest, like, I think that this is the right way to run businesses, right? Have the best people that can take on more. It's efficient, it's flat, it's lean, but the people are well compensated for that. And I think that recipe is what I would do 100 times over if I were out there running businesses.
I totally agree with you. I think efficient is the right word for it as well. And the last thing I'll leave you on, Daniel, is, we're going through kind of unprecedented times as it relates to, the world, especially with coronavirus and some of the other stuff going on. Coming out of this, what do you think are some interesting things you see or you'd like to see, or how this whole space evolves to still provide what you guys are doing, which is, top-notch products and services across the world, right? So that's a big challenge. So maybe talk a little bit about some of those trends.
Yeah, I think, look, there's a couple main trends. I think, one is a trend and one is like a near-term necessity that maybe wasn't there 6 months ago, which is like safety of our crew members in the restaurants and the guests coming in. So, whether it's the PPE that folks are now using in the restaurants, the way that we build our restaurants, the way that delivery drivers might come in and out of the restaurants. Do we have special vestibules for them in the future? I think that all of these things that ladder up to safety of people, I think now is by far and away something that, we've always been focused on health and safety of our guests and the team members, but I think in the middle of a pandemic, it's even more important. So I think, we were one of the first brands to have, our team members with masks. We were one of the first brands to have, PPE, in our restaurants. So we know it's important. It's a cost of doing business, and we're doing that. I think the other really interesting trends, though, like what's really accelerating is on, like the delivery and digital side. So, delivery, folks are staying at home. So how can we adapt our business in our existing restaurants to better be able to service digital service modes, and delivery? So do we change the prototype store? Do we build certain things that make contactless procedures, both from drive-through and or takeout and or delivery, more of a reality? So we're, both of those things in terms of the digital side, I think that's really the biggest one that's now accelerated, and thankfully, chicken has done quite well from a delivery perspective. So I argue that it's right up there with pizza. That's still to be seen if we can hold that. But look, I think it's really that we're seeing in the trends, and this stuff's not going away, right? So there will be some things that I think stay behind. And once we come out of it, I think folks will be much more aware of, how many things they touch and contactless procedures, and digital is here to stay. So I think we're thinking about all of those things from long-term trends, and it impacts what kind of stores we build, going into the future.
Amazing. No, I think I spot on, and our audience can go look at the news, and Daniel doesn't have to comment on it, but some of the news where there's a special from Jim Cramer a couple of weeks ago, just the resilience of the business model that you're running, Daniel. So kudos to that. We covered a huge range of topics today. I want to thank Daniel on behalf of our audience for being a part of this and really shedding light on to what it takes, but also what the experience is like behind the scenes of these iconic brands in a multi-dimensional setting of, finance functions, marketing set functions, strategic, analytics, et cetera, and kind of what the types of experiences you can build over your own career. So I encourage everyone to kind of check out, that side of the world a lot more. And I think, we'll communicate with the folks on ways to get in touch with Daniel and explore, opportunities at Popeyes, Burger King, as well as RBI. So with that said, thank you, Daniel, for your time and for being part of
Thank
it.
you. Thanks for having me, Kaushik. Glad to be here.
Of course.